event has been deemed a riot. Move to the east now. If you do not move to the east, you'll be subject to arrest and/or use of force, including crowd control measures. Leave the area now.
In the nearly 2 months since the death of George Floyd, protesters have gathered in Portland every night to demand an end to police violence. The standoff is centered at a federal courthouse downtown, where protesters set fires and vandalize the walls outside, as officers fire tear gas and projectiles from inside. After a series of escalating confrontations between protesters and police, a U.S. district judge outlaws the use of tear gas, rubber bullets, and other non-lethal munitions by local police, unless an officer's life is at risk. Oregon state lawmakers passed a similar law 2 weeks later, declaring that tear gas can only be used in the case of a riot. The Portland Police Department regularly declares riots in the city, and the use of tear gas continues.
Thank you. We've had a tremendous week.
President Trump signs an executive order allowing for the deployment of federal officers to U.S. cities for the purpose of protecting statues, monuments, and federal property. Although most of the focus at the time is on monuments, the order will be used as justification to send troops into Portland. And on July 1st, the Department of Homeland Security announces a new task force to protect American monuments, memorials, and statues. In its statement, DHS as the new task force will conduct ongoing assessment of potential civil unrest and allocate resources to protect people and property. This may involve potential surge activity to ensure the continuing protection of critical locations. Over the 4th of July weekend, federal officers arrive in Portland. According to a memo later obtained by the New York Times, the officers sent by the Department of Homeland Security do not have training that would prepare them for riot control or mass demonstrations. The federal officers come from various agencies, including Customs and Border Patrol, the U.S. Marshal Service, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and include BORTAC, a SWAT-like unit typically deployed against drug dealers. Officially, the federal officers are in Portland only to protect federal property, but they quickly fan out across downtown, arresting protesters as they travel between federal properties. By mid-July, local news and protesters begin reporting arrests by unidentified officers in tactical military gear driving unmarked civilian vans. In a July 16th statement from the Department of Homeland Security, Acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf confirms that federal officers are arresting protesters. In his statement, he declares the city of Portland has been under siege. Each night, lawless anarchists destroy and desecrate property, including the federal courthouse, and attack the brave law enforcement officers protecting it. Local officials demand that federal officers leave the city.
Remove your federal officers from the streets of Portland. The mayor has asked them to go home. Our congressional delegation has asked them to go home.
Last week, we were seeing the de-escalation of the violence. We were seeing things calm down, but the intervention of federal officers reignited tensions.
Oregon Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum files a lawsuit against the Department of Homeland Security, declaring, if this can happen here in Portland, it can happen anywhere.
I don't need invitations by the state mayors or state governors to do our job. We're going to do that, whether they like us there or not.
Despite earlier reports that the officers lack agency identification, DHS says officers have their agency patch on their arms, but their names are being withheld to protect them and their family. The arrival of federal agents spurs a new wave of protests as thousands take to the streets, including a protest group calling itself the Wall of Moms, who begin placing themselves between law enforcement and Black Lives Matter protesters.
Moms are here! Feds stay clear! Moms are here!
They too are tear-gassed. On July 22nd, President Trump announces the expansion of Operation Legend, with the intent to deploy federal officers to other cities around the country, all of them led by Democrats.
Today I'm announcing a surge of federal law enforcement into American communities plagued by violent crime.
That night, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler, long decried by activists for his police department's use of tear gas, meets with protesters. He too is tear-gassed by federal law enforcement. The next morning, the Department of Justice Inspector General announces an investigation into federal officers and their handling of riots in Portland and Washington, D.C.'s Lafayette Square 2 months earlier. By the weekend, more groups joined the protests in Portland, including walls of nurses and veterans. On July 25th, protests against federal officers form in other cities, including Seattle, Los Angeles, and New York. As protests continue and city leaders around the country prepare for the arrival of more federal officers, each must choose how welcoming they'll be.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.